and tell them.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I present to you the current artist of a major pop culture phenomenon that spans 1931 to now, Joe Staton. Say hi to the folks.
Hello.
So, before I get started with the questions, I want to give a little background to my audience about you. You are the current artist for Dick Tracy. You succeeded Dick Loker, and before that, it was Rick Fletcher, and before that, it was the creator of the comic, Chester Gould. You worked in tandem with Mike Curtis.
Right.
You also did Archie Super Teens #1, and that's the only thing I know of right now, but it's one of the questions that I've got ready for you. Give us a little background about you.
I've always been drawing cartoons, and I've been doing it for a living for, starting in April, it will be 50 years I've been drawing comics. Started at Charlton Comics in Connecticut. I worked at Marvel for a while, inking Hulk and Avengers, and I wound up at DC, where I worked off and on for about 30 years. So that's the main place I worked. A lot of JSA, Batman, 2 runs on Green Lantern, and 13 years on Scooby-Doo. So I say I have done the 2 greatest detectives, Dick Tracy and Scooby-Doo.
I have to agree. Nobody beats Everett Sloan and Don Messick.
Right. Yeah. And
so, I know what Charlton Comics is. It was a comic brand from at least the latest would have been like the 60s or 70s. They did like Hanna-Barbera comics, and I think they did. I don't know if they did Rocky and Bullwinkle. I know Gold Key Comics did that.
Yeah, there was a lot of overlap with that. Charlton did a lot of the licensed books, but they were kind of the bottom of the barrel. For our comics.
Harvey Comics was the bottom of the barrel, in my opinion, when it wasn't doing Dick Tracy comics.
That's true. They did Tracy, and they did Phantom reprints, which were cool.
I'd like to show my audience members the things that you sent to me in the mail.
Okay. The Spirit.
This, and this.
Yep.
Lest we forget this.
Very good.
So I'm going to ask you about these in a little bit. So,
talking about Harvey Comics, I'll just throw in that Mike Curtis, who writes Tracy, for a good while wrote Richie Rich comics for Harvey. So
wow. So does he explain why Richie and Casper look so much alike? Was Casper like a twin brother that Mr. Van Doe offed, thinking it was Richie or something?
That's a good background. I wonder if he's gotten into that. Yeah.
Well, it's got to be better than the Family Guy explanation. For those of you who are watching this, you know how to find it on YouTube. So what was your schooling in drawing?
Well, I went to State College in Kentucky, Murray State College. Well, it was actually university then, but I was an art major. I was the only one in my classes who wanted to draw comics, so people were a little befuddled by that. But I got through and headed off to New York to see if I could get any work. I'm actually educated, but I tried to put it behind me. So
before you got into college, what were like your favorite comics to read as a kid?
Obviously Tracy. I go way back liking Tracy. The Phantom. I liked Little Abner a lot. Al Cap was a big influence on me. Pogo, loved Pogo. Steve Canyon, a lot of the classic comics, and eventually started reading comic books. I think I actually learned to read from Superboy comics. I was actually looking at Dick Tracy a long time before I could read. So he's, like I said, Tracy and I go way back.
Me too, but through a different media for me. I didn't have access to the comics, but I was living in the age of VHS, and I watched the Dick Tracy animated series.
Right. Yeah.
So when you and Mike Curtis started your branch of Dick Tracy, I saw it online while Dick Loker was still running the strip. Were you guys doing that as a fan project, or had you been hired by Tribune Syndicate in preparation for Loker's retirement?
Well, it was kind of a fluke. It was a totally unauthorized fan project. There was I always wanted to do Tracy. Mike always, and I knew Mike from conventions and stuff, and he wanted to try writing some Tracy. And we had a Tracy fan, a tribute site up. So we decided we would do our version of Tracy. And there was an idea online at the time that you could kind of get by with your own version of copyrighted characters as long as you had the proper copyrights on them. This is not true in case anybody wants to do it again. So it was so we did have the proper copyrights, but we had no rights to actually do it. But so we were just going along for the tribute site and doing our version of Tracy. And that is when Dick Loker actually decided to retire. And the guys at the Tribune were aware of what we were doing. They had let us alone, but they knew we were doing our version of Tracy. And they decided, well, there are these guys who are out doing unauthorized Tracy. We never sued them, so why don't we hire them? So it turned out that the Tracy strips that we had done at the site, that was our sample, and it was the first, I don't know, 2 or 3 months of the newspaper strip. So we got a little bit of a head start with what we had already done. It was just kind of a fluke. I had always wanted to do Tracy, and it just turned out we were in place to move on in.
I have to say that using Flyface and Willie the Fifth for your first villains to bring back along with the Pouch was a pretty interesting choice. Why did they stand out most out of all of Tracy's rogues?
I'm sorry Mike's not here to answer those. Most of the story choices were his. And I had never actually heard of Flyface when we started doing it, but
He was one of the obscure characters from like the 50s, I think. 50s
yeah,
or 60s.
yeah, I'm familiar with him now.
Yeah.
Mike read an awful lot of the old Tracy stuff, and he was trying to, since we were doing our tribute, bringing the old stuff back was part of the tribute.
It's neat. When you draw, do you draw your characters from like models, or do you have like the positions and body movements and characteristics of your characters from memory when you draw? So
Well, I usually don't have the time to actually get anybody to pose or anything, so I work from what I have in my mind. I have I can take characters and move them around and just visualize them in my mind, and that's where how lots of comics guys do it. But Rick Fletcher, who was the artist right after Chester Gould and had been Chester Gould's assistant, I've seen the photos that Rick actually did have models, and he modeled a lot for himself. I've got some photos of Rick in a raincoat modeling Tracy. So you'll find in Rick Fletcher stuff, like the wrinkles on the coats are much more convincing than they are either for Gould or for me.
Fletcher had the shortest tenure of all the Tracy artists through no fault of his. He died in, I think, 83. He started in late 77 along with Max Allan Collins.
Right.
They were the minds behind Angel Top, Flat Top's daughter, and The Son of the Brow.
Yeah. They did some good stuff. I'm sorry Rick didn't last longer.
Question 5. Do you ever provide storyline input along with Mr. Curtis, or are your roles as writer and artist defined?
I have very minimal input. Mostly it's up to Mike to come up with the storylines. He'll generally give me heads up if he's planning on killing a major character or something like that. And occasionally, if there's something I'd like to do, at some point it occurred to me we'd never done a serial killer, but we should do one. So I, brought that up, and he came up with a character, and
Abner Cadaver?
um, I've forgotten the guy's name actually, but he had to do with the newspaper. Oh, there was a good shootout in an alley where Tracy faced him. I'm forgotten the guy's name now. So, but Abner isn't really a serial killer. He's a hired killer. Abner kills anybody you'd like and is very good at it. I wouldn't call Abner a serial killer.
Did you ever get the opportunity to watch the cartoon in the 1960s, the one that I talked to you about earlier?
I have seen them to a certain amount, so that I'm familiar with them, but they kind of didn't really overlap the time when I was watching TV, and I guess. But the funny thing is, of course, Mike is familiar with them more than I am,
Mhm.
and we had we wanted to bring Jojitsu in from the cartoon, the Japanese character, and probably we would have had some problem with the racial stereotyping. But the main problem was it turned out that there was a legal problem with the Trib actually having the right to use the supporting characters in the Tracy cartoon. It's amazing you run into these things sometimes. So
Yeah.
so we would have liked to have brought Jojitsu in, but we weren't able to. Cartoon characters, we did do at least a Sunday crossover with Mr. Magoo, and Mr. Magoo had crossed over with those characters.
With
So,
the same voice actors also, because they were both from UPA.
all right, yeah. So that's as close as we got.
So let me ask you, if you were able to bring Gogo Gomez and Jiu-Jitsu and Hippo Calorie
And Hemlock
and
Holmes.
Hemlock Holmes, what would be your approach for Hemlock, the anthropomorphic dog? What would you do if you were able to bring him into the comic world?
Well, I really don't know. I think we'd have him as a supporting character as a dog. I don't think we'd actually have him entirely thrown.
Anthropomorphic.
Thank you. Right.
Sure.
Yes. Close we come to that. There we have.
You brought in Cheater Gunsmoke, a two-time villain from the cartoon, but he wasn't a villain. He was a gambler who was killed in a shootout.
Wow, you really know this stuff. I'm trying to remember the name. We have there's a big dog that was part of the Tracy cartoons, and we bring him in. What's it?
Mug?
Mug. Yes, we bring Mug in
From the Pear-Shaped storyline originally.
Yep, and we did some stuff with Mug that was kind of a tribute to Scooby Doo. So, and used Honeymoon and some of her little friends as fill-ins for the Scooby characters, and I think we wound up with the villain saying, I would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for the kids and their stupid dog. So we have Mug coming through and filling in.
So, which classic villain that you have in continuity of the strip, which is your favorite to draw, and which are the most cumbersome? And
I like Mumbles a lot, and we did a story with Measles. I
remember he was trying to get revenge on Gravel Gertie for the death of his mother, and this was Halloween, and you guys had him overdose on pain patches.
Yeah, I'm kind of amazed we got by. That was a pretty intense story.
Mhm.
Gravel Gertie was hitting him in the face with hot coals. And that was a good one.
And Sparkle Plenty Tracy, I think she used a knife or cleaver on his clavicle.
Right. So I'm kind of surprised we got through with that intense sequence. But the ones that the one who really bothers me to draw is Little Face Feeney, and which I haven't had to draw a lot, but he was in
I'm
there a
glad that
bit.
you made him a good guy. I like reformed villains.
The mole is entirely reformed,
Hmm.
uh, but
And
Little Face,
that was even before your guys' tenure. It was during Rick Fletcher and Max Allan Collins' stint.
right. And now the mole is happily married and
And
is
is the
running.
stepfather of Toad. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So, but Little Face Feeney, he's got this monstrous head, and he's supposed to have a tiny little face in the middle of it. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's hard to realize that his face has to be that small. So there have been times I've, just pasted over or shot down his face and gotten it in there to get the proper proportions. So he's a problem.
As long as we're on the subject, you've seen the Dick Tracy movie, right?
Yep.
So you saw how Littleface in the 12th Street garage with the other villains was made to look, right?
Hmm.
At first, when I first saw it, I thought this guy had a giant head. But I mean, it wasn't until years later that I realized that it was just he was literally that small.
It's like a little bitty face stuck in there. Yeah.
Yeah. I would recommend for anyone watching this to watch the movie and read the book, The Making of Dick Tracy, the movie, because it explains how Chuck Hicks and William Forsythe and Al Pacino had all that latex put on their face.
Wow.
So it must have been as cumbersome for them as it was for you, Joe.
Right. Yeah. Mike met William Forsythe at a show and got me a nice side drawing of him as in character. So that's good. So he's kind of our mascot.
Before I get to my next question, you remember at the beginning of Dick Tracy the radio broadcast, the movie?
No, I don't remember that.
Since my name is future voice actor, would it be all right if I provide a imitation?
That would be fine.
This was Neil Ross's voice. Gangland enforcers broke the arms of an elderly news dealer this afternoon when he refused to share his week's receipts with them. Stacks of newspapers were tossed in the gutter as the thugs wrecked the business and made their getaway. Lunchtime, crowds were paralyzed by the suddenness of the crime. Not a hand was raised in protest, but organized crime is their name. What appeared to be organized hoods shattered the kneecaps of the beloved operator of a shoeshine parlor today as horrified customers looked on. The bootblack would not give up his receipts and paid dearly for his failure to surrender to gang demand.
My goodness, I'm impressed.
Thanks. I really appreciate that. Since Mike isn't there to answer this question, you can answer it to the best of your ability, but there's only part of it that you can answer. How did you and Mike Curtis come up with the idea of Stiletta Jones being the widow of Flat Top?
I don't know specifically how Mike came up with her, but we keep on thinking there are always Flat Top has a large family,
Mm.
and they Angel Top and Blow Top, and they're it's a large family, and Flat Top Junior, who is I
Mm.
guess he's one of my very favorite characters, Junior. But it just occurred to Mike that we've never met Mrs. Flat Top, and how he came up with the knives, and that's just how he thinks.
What about her? What about her race? When you decide to make her African American, was that his idea or yours?
That would definitely be his idea, and he gave me ideas how he wanted her drawn, and Mike comes up with the ideas, and I figure out how they're supposed to look while they're doing all this stuff.
I find it pretty interesting that, I mean, I don't want this to sound any way racist or anything like that. Floyd Jones choosing Stiletta as his wife, that must have really honked Pop Top off, because he seems like the type who would have been like the insurrectionists from a few weeks ago.
Uh, he,
Pop
he
Top.
popped up. Oh yeah, oh yeah, unexcitable boy.